Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens. It is Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
I'm
Yep.
doing the wind technique as I'm sitting.
That's what it's called.
The wind technique, kung fu wind technique.
That's the wind technique.
I think so. You like try to engulf the person's entire body like the wind.
People might not know this, but Jay Stevens actually is a practicing martial artist, aren't you?
I know. What a serious guy sometimes.
Serious. When he finds something he likes, he sticks to it. Now, what form of martial arts do you currently train in, sir?
Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu. Why'd you pick jiu-jitsu?
Gosh, you put me on the spot.
That's what we're doing.
Because it's almost seemed like a superpower. It's like
doesn't matter how big you are.
Yeah, size kind of. Size comes into play, but it helps negate the size and strength issue. Small man can beat larger man. Yeah. It happens all the time. You see it all the time.
Yeah. Based on how they fight. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Have you always been into martial arts?
No, when I was a kid, I think, the Bruce Lee era days, I had the little black flat shoes,
Really?
They went to take Taekwondo lessons for a while, and with a crazy Asian guy who would whack us with the bamboo stick.
Is this in
when
Hawaii?
we were doing push-ups? No, this was in LA, like in junior high or elementary school. Didn't stick with it then. Wish I would have stuck with it, but didn't stick with it.
You'd be a black belt now if you did.
Yeah, I got to be black belt a long time ago.
What would have happened if Jay Stevens stuck on that?
With Taekwondo.
Yeah.
What a path.
Everyone was doing
I feel like David Lee Roth now.
Yeah. Whatever his thing is, that it's true though. He studied this form of martial arts where it's basically where you can go from the sitting position to killing someone in one move.
Bruce Lee?
No, David Lee Roth.
Oh.
It's like a technique. I don't know what it's called, but it's crazy. Anyway.
Don't rush the stage at a Van Halen show.
The reason we're talking about karate today is we discussed, or we have watched the documentary Iron Fists and Kung Fu Kicks. It was Jay's pick.
Another hidden gem. I found it. It was great. It was fun.
And I thought it was good.
The history of Kung Fu in motion pictures, basically, right?
Yeah.
Started from way back when.
Yeah, and it kind of started in we talked about Kurosawa, and in Kurosawa's case, his thing, obviously samurai movies, which is kind of different, but it's relatively similar in the sense that Kurosawa would take Shakespeare works and rewrite them as almost samurai epics.
Ooh.
And there's a lot of Macbeth is one. There's several that he did, but in the same kind of vein, these early Kung Fu movies, more specifically with the Shaw Brothers, were basically retold kind of like Chinese operas through Kung Fu. And early on, they not only had female lead characters that would do this, which was like groundbreaking. It didn't happen here in the country, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But early on, it was almost like a ballet. They had dancers that would do this, and you can see in the way it's done, it's very
these amazing
fluid,
body kicks and spins. Yeah.
It's incredible, but it's essentially ballet.
Same thing,
just with knives and in some forms, martial arts is a dance, right?
Oh, very.
So. We'll get into our favorite Kung Fu flicks, our favorite Kung Fu kicks. It's Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Jay Stevens, Mike the Intern, back in the studio. It is Dark Side of the Stream, discussing Iron Fists and Kung Fu kicks. Another thing that was really evident to me in this documentary was how wrong Hollywood normally is.
Oh, yeah.
Because for a long time, they didn't feel like, an Asian actor could, be the lead role.
Yeah.
It was always a white guy.
Bruce Lee right there in the palm of their hands.
Yeah, big time. And the Shaw brothers passed on because he wasn't full Chinese. He was half American, half Chinese, half Jewish.
They made two
didn't
errors.
like him. So and so then he gets basically, you're not good enough over there. He comes over here, same thing. They steal the idea of Kung Fu from him.
Yeah. Don't put him in that either.
Then they steal it. Warner Brothers steals it from him. But they get Carradine, it's such a great idea, like a Western Kung Fu. It's such a great idea. And had Bruce Lee been in it, I think it would have been phenomenal.
It would have been epic.
But it didn't happen, and it is what it is. He goes back to China and becomes basically their biggest. He's their John Wayne, essentially.
Became huge
at their time. Now, before
everybody
wanted
to be Bruce Lee, right?
Dude, I still do.
Yeah.
I mean, Enter the Dragon is arguably. I watch that movie on every other month basis. It's one of my favorite kung fu movies.
I used to have nunchucks, throwing stars when I was in junior high. I practiced it all, man.
Real side note. Well, I guess we'll talk about Bruce Lee. We can talk about that stuff later since we're already on it. That's one big part of this, and they go beyond Bruce Lee. They get into Jackie Chan, all this stuff. But Bruce Lee, really, when you think of kung fu, he is the man. He's the John Wayne. When you think of westerns, you think of John Wayne or you think of Clint Eastwood. It's the same thing with Bruce Lee and kung fu movies. My favorite, like I said, Enter the Dragon. Story time. The first nudity I ever saw in a major motion picture. My friend Travis Freeman, when we were in elementary school.
Shout out to Travis.
Travis, Cape Girardeau, Holly Boy. We were over at his house, did a sleepover, and he was like, hey, I got this movie called Big Boss. And you get to see a girl with no shirt on in Big Boss. That was the first nudity I ever saw as a young man. Ever. So thank you, Bruce Lee, for that.
See?
Thank you so much.
Bruce Lee, man. He knew what's up, man.
And he brought it to the table. But anyway, Enter the Dragon, my favorite. What's anything particular like Enter the Dragon?
I remember Enter the Dragon. You know, I mean, just the fact of this dude just taking on dudes. And
they describe his fighting style as a change too, which I thought was interesting because up until that point we discussed that it was like more of a ballet, more of a dance. Bruce Lee was an accomplished dancer, more specifically a cha-cha dancer. He actually won cha-cha dancing contests in the 50s. There's photos, you Google it and you can see it. And he used that technique in his fighting style where it wasn't fluid. It was boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Real shoddy, quick. And no one had seen that before, and he did it. And I think it was, and he still, even though Enter the Dragon was released after he passed away, the impact he left on such a short period of time, it could have been very interesting to see what he could have done.
Like The Doors or something, he just came and went.
Just real quick, but I mean, you can't think of Kung Fu and not think of Bruce Lee, and they do a very good job talking about him and his legacy and what he was able to bring to the table and really affect the idea of Kung Fu filmmaking forever. Forever,
like,
but definitely in the
John
70s.
Wick, all these movies, that's all just Bruce Lee movies, man. Matrix, you know?
The basis, without Bruce Lee, there's no foundation.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, like after he passed, everyone was like clamoring. They were like, oh my God, our cash cow's gone, what do you do? And then all of a sudden, Bruce Leonardo, Bruce like all
Bruce
these different,
Leroy,
guys that were trying to be, which they wasn't. But it's so funny how Hollywood's like, no, he's kicking people. We don't do that in America. We shoot them.
So they stuck him in those little theaters in the Bronx, and then all the breakdancers were watching, and they incorporated Kung Fu into their
that was in the 80s. And
like,
we'll get into that in the next segment about the influence of Kung Fu and our favorite Kung Fu movies next. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Hey kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but in your car.
Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio, Dark Side of the Stream, discussing Iron Fist and Kung Fu.
Everybody
kicks.
was Kung Fu fighting.
So we'll get into the, what Kung Fu kind of brought to the table as far as just everything else, whether it was motion pictures, hip hop, whatever, music in general. But before we do that, where are you kind of at in the Kung Fu? Like what are your favorite Kung Fu movies? And other than we talked about Bruce Lee.
I was just the mainstream, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris. I remember Chuck Norris was a big thing when I was a kid.
Who was the bad guy in a
that's right.
movie.
And Billy Jack, right? Yeah, And but nowadays I don't really watch those movies, but I can appreciate like getting down on a fight scene from John Wick or a fight scene from Matrix.
Are the best. Oh my God, they're unbelievable.
Like they're the most epic fight scenes,
dude,
right?
So
and it's one dude just smoking dudes,
the choreography on those things are unbelievable.
Which I think that deep down to a male's soul or DNA makeup, I think every one of us would like to be the guy that could kick everybody's ass.
Well, yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
That's part of it. I get it. It's inherent in us. I mean, obviously that's starting to change. You can see things in the world changing, but inherently, that's
I think
biology.
inherently, like everybody would love to be that guy that they could just boom take everybody out.
all day.
If there was a magic pill you could take and do it. So, but it's not. It's a lot of hard work to get to that level to be even to do that. It's still a fight's are a fight. One punch can end a fight either way. It doesn't matter how good anybody is, but at least you'd have a game plan, which with martial arts, I feel like it's anything can happen in a fight and you don't want to fight and it's crazy, but at least if something goes down, you have a game plan at least. You're comfortable in that scenario, and you have at least experience as opposed to somebody who's just blindly going into a fight, swinging.
Some of my favorite before we do this, there's a streaming channel called Pluto that just has a bunch of free stuff on it, and you can stream it, and they have their own little specific channels. They have a Kung Fu channel on there that shows old school Kung Fu movies. It's awesome.
Man.
My wife hates it because I love Westerns. I love Kung Fu movies. I just watch those all the time. But I'm more of an old school guy. I mean, of course, I love John Wick and The Matrix, all that stuff, and there's some great stuff out now. But I like the old school stuff. Five Fingers of Death, so badass. My favorite probably is the 5 Deadly Venoms. I think that's such a really cool.
See, you're deeper in the scene.
Man. It's a great story. I mean, if you can get over the subtitles and the bad, like the video, the audio
dubbing.
Dude, it's such a cool movie.
It's funny
man.
when they interviewed the dubbers too, and they're talking about where you're just reading the guy's lips and just making up stuff.
Well, because as they were going on, like they were cranking out, like they were doing a movie a week.
What is this story? I don't know. Just keep talking.
Shaw Brothers was like, that guy was talking about like editing. They do like 72 hours.
He was
editing
smart. He had a whole thing in house. The actors would live there and everything. Like it was legit.
It was a production house.
His farm, man. His movie farm.
And they put out a ton of movies.
What's funny is you talk about the Kung Fu series where it's Keith Carradine and he's this Kung Fu fighter that stumbles into these towns, these Western towns, and gets wrapped up in a thing. That's the exact premise of The Mandalorian. It's the exact same premise. He rolls into town, and he's this outlaw guy, and he gets roped up into some adventure, and then he moves to the next town.
But that's like The Rifleman. That's like all those westerns. That's how they all had.
That's why The Mandalorian is so badass.
Story arc, but really it was a week to week. What are you involved in, and then throwing a kung fu thing in. It's been done all over the place, and that's why The Mandalorian's so good because it has that western feel.
It has that western feel.
But yeah, I mean it. Like I said, you can check out the 5 Deadly Venoms, man. It's a great movie. So good. It's one of my favorites. Oh, God, it's so good. And then, Shaolin Temple, obviously, Wu-Tang big time influenced by this. And that was kind of where they went into, like, 47th Street. Was that what it was?
I'm not sure,
it was like 45th Street, 47th Street. There's like
the movie theaters.
This strip of theaters where it was porno flicks and like foreign films you couldn't see anywhere else, which was kung fu movies, and it was $2 a showing, and these guys were just cranking them out.
These young kids would go there and they'd
nothing
watch,
else to do in the hood, go watch,
hang out all day in the movie theater.
Yeah, dude, and they got to see some incredible movies, and they're super awesome. So check them out. You really should. I mean, it's a great documentary, Iron Fist and Kung Fu Kicks, to kind of give you an idea of if you haven't dived into this world of kung fu movies. Which, by the way, I took a college course in kung fu. And that's all we did. Watched Drunken Master. I don't think we did any kind of like the campy Shaw Brothers ones, like 5 Deadly Venoms, anything like that. But it was like the serious ones that were like, Enter the Dragon, 5 Deadly Venoms. I think we did The One-Armed Swordsman, which also is a badass movie. But there were several. And then I definitely got an A in that class.
Yay!
One of the very few A's
Mike
I
got an A!
In one of the very few in college. We'll get to our conclusion, Dark Side of the Stream, next, and what we'll be watching in the next week. Next, on 104.7 The Cave.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Jay Stevens, Mike the Intern, Dark Side of the Stream, back in the studio discussing Iron Fist and Kung Fu Kicks, a really good documentary on Netflix. And
God, I had something on the tip of my tongue just now that I wanted to play.
While you think about that, in this rating system, how many fingers of death would you give this documentary?
This documentary? Good solid 4.5.
4.5 fingers of death. I was
it was an entertaining watch.
Yeah,
it was made really cool, and it kept my attention. And it was like a history, and it was a brief history. It wasn't crazy
long. Wasn't too long for Jay Stevens. It was about an hour and 40 minutes. So I congratulate you on a longer than an hour movie, which is good.
And it was interesting because I didn't really know the history that deep like that, and it was fun watching that. Going back to speaking about that, don't rush the stage at a Van Halen show because David Lee Roth will take you out. Do you ever see that video of Tool performing?
Oh,
and the fan runs up, and the dude full on, because he's like a brown belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, he's jiu-jitsu.
He just full on throws the guy.
Piggybacking what you said, size don't matter. Like Maynard's not a big guy,
little guy,
but very strong.
Got underneath him, flipped him, jumped on top of him, choked him with the mic cord.
Done. You're done.
It's hilarious.
He knows.
And he kept singing.
Yeah.
And he didn't miss a note.
No. Dude, he's intense.
Google that on YouTube if you want to see something funny, man.
I give it 4 fingers of death. Jay gives it 4.5. Check out the documentary, Iron Fist and Kung Fu Clicks, especially if you are kind of, you know a little bit about Kung Fu, you like action movies, you're going to get some really good suggestions of movies you should watch, which you can really watch anywhere.
And it's
right
cool,
now.
the transformation, how they started with, like, you say, the ballet and opera. Then they started to get a little bit bloody, some weapons, more action, more punches, more fists.
But then it's come back around in a circle, because you get to movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where it gets back to like this ballet choreographed like thing, and it's like the
wire work that they
stuff
do
and all that stuff.
Amazing,
it's more
right?
of a ballet. So, and now with like movies like John Wick, that's there too, but it's also the pa-pa-pum stuff. So it's like a combination of the two, which is just interesting to see the development of how this thing, and it really plays into what they think audiences want. And obviously we want more blood and more action, right?
Yeah!
So I guess it's my turn next week for Dark Side of the Stream, and I'm picking the last Blockbuster.
Oh, that's great.
Spent a lot of time at Blockbuster in my day.
Man, me too.
I probably still owe them money for late fees, but
joke's on them.
Looks like I waited you out on that one. I win. As always, like, subscribe, share Dark Side of the Stream wherever you get your podcasts. And your history, or no, not your history, your homework lesson for next week is the last Blockbuster. As always, thank you from Jay and myself. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.